Church, can I be honest with you? The word disoriented has come up as the perfect word to describe what I've been feeling as I make my way through these days of the pandemic. Things that seem like such sure things have been thrown out the window. The way of working and moving around and ministering has been turned on its head, and at times I feel like shouting, "Stop this madness! Can we please just get back to normal?" Yet, in these moments, it is where we are reminded of our smallness and our need for someone greater than us. And so we must make the choice to once again take a longer look at the life and person of Jesus Christ and who he is to us. We must recall the things that Jesus did and allow the good news to meet us where we are, pandemic or otherwise. So let's continue to offer our attention to Christ. See, Holy Week began on Sunday with Jesus' triumphal entry fulfilling prophecy and creating a stir in an already growing city due to the impending Passover celebration. Jerusalem was buzzing, and Jesus' reputation preceded him, having raised Lazarus from the dead earlier. This only served to make the atmosphere even more intense. Now, early on in this week, Jesus declared the failure of God's people to live up to what was meant to be their mission, to be a blessing to the world. Now, I wonder if Jesus would say the same about us today. See, Jesus' authority was showing up more and more, and the formal authorities began to push back, scheming to try and take him out. Now, as their schemes come at him fast and furiously, Jesus meets them one at a time, eventually causing them to retreat. For it says in Luke chapter 20, verse 40, "For they, the scribes, no longer dared to ask him any question." However, as we who have God's word in our hands sitting here today know that eventually he is handed over. Yet note that he does not let them take his life, but rather he offers it up willingly. He lays it down for a world of traitors and liars, demonstrating a far greater love than any of us could hope to possess, left to our own devices. And so we arrive at Thursday, and it is on this night that provides the events that we want to focus on together. John 13, verse 117 says, "Now before the feast of the Passover, when Jesus knew that his hour had come to depart out of this world to the Father, having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. During supper, when the devil had already put it into the heart of Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, to betray him, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, and that he had come from God and was going back to God, rose from supper. He laid aside his outer garments, and taking a towel, tied it around his waist. Then he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and to wipe them with the towel that was wrapped around him. He came to Simon Peter, who said to him, 'Lord, do you wash my feet?' Jesus answered him, 'What I am doing you do not understand now, but afterward you will understand.' Peter said to him, 'You shall never wash my feet.' Jesus answered him, 'If I do not wash you, you have no share with me.' Simon Peter said to him, 'Lord, not my feet only, but also my hands and my head.' Jesus said to him, 'The one who is bathed does not need to wash except for his feet, but is completely clean. And you are clean, but not every one of you.' For he knew who was to betray him. That was why he said, 'Not all of you are clean.' When he had washed their feet and put on his outer garments and resumed his place, he said to them, 'Do you understand what I have done to you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you are right, for so I am. If I then, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have given you an example, that you also should do just as I have done to you. Truly, truly, I say to you, a servant is not greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent him. If you know these things, blessed are you if you do them.' Now further along, in verse 34 to 35, it says, 'A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another, just as I have loved you. you also are to love one another. And by this, all people will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. Now, I want you to hold 3 words in your mind that come from hearing what Jesus did and said, as highlighted by John. The first word is community. Jesus' new commandment that he left with his disciples is meant to be carried forward to us today. Not on your own, but plural. You see, you cannot carry out the command on your own. Love one another. Not only love yourself, but we are to love one another. See, God exists as a trinity, 3ness yet oneness, distinct but the same. And it is community that allows us to grasp some of that mystery in a more tangible way. Community marked by love is needed now more than ever, and it should be one that looks to show up even when it's difficult. It is meant to be one that drives out debilitating fear. So let us consider how we can demonstrate the presence of God in the community that we are called to. The second is this: identity. God's word tells us that by this, all people will know that we are disciples of Jesus. We will be identified rightly as part of the family belonging to Jesus. It's not by our polished appearance. It's not by our flawless theology, as if that were even possible for flawed humans, or even our perfect performances and productivity, but rather it is by the love found within and amongst us. Community, identity, and finally, humility. Throughout these times, Jesus was more and more clear with his people about who he was. In verse 13, he affirms their understanding of him as Lord and teacher. And with this understanding, Jesus humbles himself as one who serves, calling on his disciples to do the same. If the God of heaven, whose hands flung the stars into space, can lower himself to now grasp the dirty feet of his disciples, then are we not called to a much smaller task? May these actions of Jesus pierce our hearts in the area of pride that we are so susceptible to feeding when we are looking for self-esteem and finding our worth in things besides Jesus. Community, identity, humility, all grounded in the love of God.